Hi there everyone, Lars here with another writer's review and some of my own personal thoughts, brought to you by Camille's Harem, not just a podcast for novice writers by novice writers, but also a YouTube channel by novice writers for novice writers, because writing is an adventure, it's more fun with friends. It's a cold, cruel world that we live in, when a story that is so good, when a story that just deserves way more attention and love than it got, something like Hunter's Guild Red Hood just gets axed before we can even see the full potential that this story had. Yes, I made a video about Hunter's Guild Red Hood a little while ago. It was a story that I highly recommended. It was a story that I think does a really great job of tackling fairy tales in a modern setting and everything like that, but well, Japan thought otherwise. Shonen Jump thought otherwise and said, nope, this story's getting the axe. And I've got some thoughts about this. So, here we are. Welcome to Camille's Harem. Not just a podcast for novice writers by novice writers, but also a YouTube channel by novice writers for novice writers. Because writing is an adventure, it's more fun with friends. And oh boy, I have a whole lot of thoughts in regards to Hunter's Guild. I want to go into, well, what happened right here? Why did it fail? Why is it important that it failed? Especially for us as writers. What can we learn from this? What can we consider? I also want to express my own personal thanks to Kawaguchi, and I want to get into what actually happened here at the end of the story and why, despite the fact that this series was axed so soon, why it's still so freaking good. And wow, a lot of my thoughts are just going to come spilling on out of here. This is unadulterated Lars just ranting from the heart because I have a lot to say. So let's get into it. First of all, let me please congratulate Kawaguchi at just a phenomenal start to his career as a solo mangaka. Even though this series was axed, this was a phenomenal opening. I loved the very first few chapters. In fact, I actually loved the whole thing. I love the way that the characters just light up. I mean, seriously, look at them smile, and it's infectious. I honestly don't come across many illustrated works where I smile when the characters do. That is just, it's so dang good. Plus also, I love me some strong, thick women. Let me just say that Grimm and Debonair, mwah, top tier waifus. You can't convince me otherwise. And I just really enjoyed the characters. I loved the world. I loved the potential that this world held. I liked the pacing of the story, despite what many other people said. And I am going to get into that later. I really, really enjoyed this from beginning to end. And it came just at the right time for me as well. I was feeling kind of down in the dumps, depressed when I came across this manga, and it lit me up. It made me feel happy. It made me feel energized, motivated, and it helped me to also make some very crucial decisions for my own works, especially with deciding that, hey, I want to tackle some of my own fairy tale ideas. I want to take the risk. I want to do it. And that's something that I really have to thank Kawaguchi for, and I really have to thank this series for. And in fact, I'm just going to say it right here, right now, this is going to be one of my life goals. One of these days, before my life is over, I want to meet Kawaguchi in person. I can't speak a lick of Japanese. I doubt he can speak a lick of English, but I'm going to meet with him. And I am going to thank him personally for this amazing story. I'm going to ask for his autograph, and I'm going to ask him what other stories he would have wanted to tell had the series been allowed to continue, and just have a great conversation with him to the best of our ability. I am writing that down. That is one of my life goals. I am going to make it happen. Now, as a fan and follower of Hunter's Guild Red Hood, I have been a part of a lot of the conversations that have gone back and forth as the series has progressed, especially those who were really, really hoping, and I was one of them, that the series would not get prematurely canceled. And there were a lot of discussions around why the series was not getting the praise and recognition that it ultimately deserved, especially in Japan. And I have to agree with some of the people who were saying that it was because it was a risk. There's not, like, a lot of people talk about the pacing within the story. Well, the first few chapters go really, really fast, And then it does slow down, which I'm totally fine with. You're talking to the guy, or you're watching the guy who loves the opening of The Lord of the Rings, which is really slow, but it is brilliantly slow. The same with The Wheel of Time or Game of Thrones. It's nice to have a slow opener because it allows us to better know these characters before we go into more adventures and shenanigans. Now then, there's also something to be said about just simply throwing the audience right into the thick of things, which I, as an author, actually do in my own stories. I don't build up really slowly. I throw you right into the middle of things and go from there. Both approaches actually do a lot of good when written well. And I personally think that Kawaguchi did a phenomenal job. He wanted to build up the stakes, build up the characters, and introduce us slowly and in a very meaningful way to the wide cast of characters that were supposed to become very important later on. Now, this goes against the shonen formula, which is action, 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 and you learn about these characters in important character moments, usually at some sort of climax within the battle. Battles have certain tiers, and once you reach the end of that tier, you reach a certain climax where a character is supposed to reveal something about himself or herself, their motivations, their powers, their story. We get a little bit more action, another reveal. It's a formula that has worked for a very long time, and it's a formula that people feel very comfortable with. And Kawaguchi took an amazing risk in going against that formula. Now, what we've definitely seen both here in the West and in the East is that when you go against established norms, you usually tend to face a lot of pushback, and that pushback can lead to your story ultimately failing. Not because it wasn't a good story, but because it just wasn't what people wanted. And I personally think that that is totally fine. If you are giving it your all to write a good story and people just don't accept it, you haven't failed. Kawaguchi hasn't failed. Hunter's Guild did not fail. It is a very, very well written story. It was just a very big risk. And I agree with what some people have been saying online. The current meta for Japanese storytelling, especially within shonen, is not geared towards a high fantasy story. And when you pay attention to the world building, the characters, and everything that is within Hunter's Guild, yes, even the crazy, ridiculous mineral Wolfonium, which definitely doesn't roll off the tongue, but is still really cool, even all of that just... It's high fantasy, and high fantasy hasn't really fit well within general shonen storytelling for quite some time. No, instead the norm that we usually see is we see stuff like all of the isekai, which has really dominated the meta and everything within Japanese storytelling. We also then have, like, you look at something like Fairy Tail. Fairy Tail at first glance looks like it's going to be high fantasy, but really it's all about that wonderful fan service, the power of family and friendship, and really big over-the-top battles. Whereas Hunter's Guild was like, hey, we can have really over-the-top battles if you want, and there are definitely some of those within the story, but instead, let me introduce you to this wide sweeping world. Crazy tree giants, massive manta rays that can take out entire towns, hermit crabs that want to murder people? That's genuinely terrifying. As well as a war against werewolves, the mystery of why the dragons disappeared, and who are these different hunters? What are their backstories? What is this crazy fortress on wheels and all of this stuff? Rather than simply giving you all of the answers right off the bat, we get a slow burn for the world building. And as someone who loves high fantasy, I really appreciate that, because that is the essence of high fantasy. Rather than giving you all the answers all at once, you are introduced to this huge world. You're invited to step on in, and as you spend time with the characters, you learn through their experiences what is going on, and you come to appreciate this world as they do. You fall in love with it, and with the plot, and with the rest of the characters as they do. That is part of the essence of high fantasy. And that's just something that doesn't fit very well in with the shonen formula. It is about speed, 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 and clearly explaining everything that's going on. You can still have your mysteries, you can still have your mystery boxes, your questions, your twists and your reveals for later on. That happens all the time, and it's done pretty well in other series, but it's usually not as expansive or as wide as what you got in Hunter's Guild. It just, once again, it just didn't fit the formula. And because I've already brought it up, the subject of pacing. Yes, the pacing definitely got slow after the first amazing few chapters where you're thrown into the thick of it with Velu, Grimm, the attack on the hamlet, the introduction to the Red List, and everything like that. And then things slow down. I'm personally totally okay with that. And I saw that a lot of other people were as well. It's just that it did not fit what was expected. And a lot of people were like, we're not seeing enough, we're not seeing enough. And I do agree. I would have liked to have seen more adventures with Velu and Grimm on their way to the Ironworks than just simply arriving quickly at the Ironworks. And this is something that I can critique the series on. When you are introducing a very expansive large world, you have to make it truly feel big by adding in journey time, which during the Ironworks arc, we actually got that feeling of time and journey, which was really good. But that should have also happened before that arc began, allowing us more time to really get to know Velu and Grimm, and just seeing more shenanigans, seeing maybe a few more monsters, and really building up Velu's excitement and confidence that he can become a hunter. That probably would have been a really good way to go, but I guarantee it would have still fit in with the more slow-paced storytelling and more expansive world building that Kawaguchi was aiming for. So it probably still would have gotten the series axed, if I'm being all honest. So now that I've expressed my thanks and I've spouted on long enough about pacing and shonen formulas and yada yada yada, let's actually get into how this entire crazy story came to its conclusion. And you can definitely tell that Kawaguchi wanted to go out the way that he wanted to. He was not going to let the readers or the editors have their way with his story and just simply end it prematurely. And I just have to say, I really, really love how he did it. So let me just quickly break it down right here. Full spoilers. Watch out ahead, everyone. So what happens is that once Velu and his friends have passed through the debarkation exam, they've proven that they are worthy of becoming hunters, which was actually a really, really good exam arc in and of itself. Suddenly, the mayor shows up, who is not actually dead, spirits Velu away. He has thrown the massive werewolf who belongs to the Red List basically across the world using magic from the pages of the world building book. He was a hunter 500 years ago, and he's the hunter who helped destroy the dragons. And he realized that in the process that they were just condemned to a never-ending war against evil. There would always be some sort of demand that would put humanity in the crosshairs of just overwhelming odds. And he said, it's all for entertainment. The gods handed these books down to us and told us to create these stories. And so we created stories. Some stories worked, some stories failed. And in the process of it, the gods and the beings beyond were entertained. And yet we suffered for it. Are we supposed to suffer for the entertainment and in fulfillment of others? No, I refuse to let this continue on. And so long as this world exists, creator after creator, God after God will come down and ensure that humanity is put through the same trial again and again and again. It doesn't matter what flavor it is. We are built to suffer. And so I'm going to end it all. This is brilliant storytelling. It is absolutely meta on so many levels. One level that is clearly very meta about is that, guess what? We have told so many fairy tales by now, and we've done so many retellings of fairy tales, and we've done retellings of the retellings of those fairy tales, that basically, yeah, we have heard nearly every story. Now then, here at Camille's Harem, I say, look, it doesn't matter if you've heard every story. Your story is still unique because you're the one who is writing it. And that is something that we still even get here within Hunter's Guild, that it doesn't matter if it's the same story, but that humanity, or in this case, the characters within the story, have to continue to push on. That it doesn't matter what came before or what's being done elsewhere on some other world, but that what matters is what they do here in the moment, because it is their story that counts. That was really cool. But also, yeah, we as the creators and as the audience, we are the gods who demand that worlds are constantly thrown into chaos, that characters are tormented, that there is death, trial, that there is victory and defeat, and all of these things. And we draw meaning from that. We draw entertainment from that. For us, this is very fulfilling. But what about the characters? What exactly are they going through? This is another very meta moment. Anyone who has spent time either writing or dreaming about characters, drawing characters, painting them, sculpting them, whatever it be, you as the creator come to realize that these characters really start taking on a life of their own. They become very, very real. They have their own autonomy, their own personalities, their own goals, motivations, feelings. It is so fantastic to get to know these characters because they're just, wow, they're something else. And it still surprises me after all these years just how individualistic and amazing my own characters can become because they take on a life of their own. And so here we have it where you have all of these characters. They all have their own stories, their own motivations. The debarkation exam did a fantastic job of introducing who so many of these people are and just giving them fantastic motivations. You wanted to get to know them more. You wanted to root for them. You wanted to see how they would succeed against the werewolves. And now the mayor is stepping in and saying it's better off that we don't exist at all, because all that the gods want from us is they want our pain for their entertainment. And the answer that Velu has for the mayor is, well, it doesn't matter. I want to live. I want the story to go on. I don't want a world of endings, whether they be happy or sad. I want to go on. And that is something that all characters have within them, that you create, that you write. It doesn't matter that you stamp the end on the final page. Their story continues. They're always with you. They're always growing, living, doing something else. And that's fantastic. And that's something that's just, it's so meta. And it really spoke to me as a writer. And another thing that was super meta about the ending, and just really a huge double bird to the editors, to the readers in Japan, and really everyone else who was a naysayer about this series, it was, well, basically, it doesn't matter if the series is getting axed. We have these powers that are trying to overthrow the story, bring it all to an end, and yet it is the characters of the story who are like, no, it doesn't matter. Once again, if you slap the end onto this, we're still going on. And that's the power of the final page, that the journey has just begun. Whether or not Kawaguchi ever returns to Hunter's Guild in some form or another, the adventures will always continue because we can't stop them. No matter what we do, these characters are alive. They are their own. They are Kawaguchi's. And so long as he is able to write and draw, they will have life. And so long as there are audience members who love these characters, they will continue on and on. That's super cool right there. And also, it's a fun little jab to say, like, hey, look, the adventure has just begun. Whether it be Kawaguchi's own adventure as a mangaka that has just begun, or, and this is something I do believe, I think that he's going to return with Hunter's Guild at some future moment. This story is too expansive, too amazing, too deep to just let fall by the wayside. And once again, I've read a lot of people say, well, it's done and it's over. He's going to move on. He's going to create another fantastic story, and he's going to finally find the recognition and the popularity that he so justly deserves. And I do agree with that. And I also agree that, yeah, he can still improve his art, he can improve his writing, and he'll eventually have that story that makes him really a recognized figure within the manga community. And I'm really looking forward to that day. But I also do believe that Hunter's Guild will come back in some form or another, which is another reason why I just really, really want to meet with him someday and just be like, what are you going to do? Because I do believe that he is not yet through with Velu and Grimm, and that there are still a ton of stories that he wants to tell with them in it. And this is something that, once again, as an author, as a creator, yeah, there are so many stories that I still want to tell with some of my characters. Some stories will be told in books. Other stories, well, they'll just remain with me. But those stories will be told nonetheless. And I also have to say right here that the ending left me not just feeling sad, because it was sad that it was done, but also feeling happy and fulfilled. It is an ending that reminds me a lot of how The Lord of the Rings ends. That it's an ending to a story, but it's not the ending. There's so much more to say. And in many ways, it's a happy story. It's a happy ending. There's still many adventures yet to come, but Velu is now a hunter, and he understands what it means to be a hunter. But he's also given the chance to now be a hero, which is also a dream that he had. And he's going to continue to work with Grimm to bring down the werewolves and save the people of this world. And on top of that, there's so many other things that are left open. What's going to happen to Grimm because she's been magically forced back into her adult form? What will happen? There's a whole lot that could be said right there. And many of the other characters are now left wondering, well, what are we going to do? What just happened? And they've been freed from the constraints of the book and are now given total freedom. What comes next? This is why I was so happy with the ending, because there's so much potential. And when a story ends, you either end it so completely that it's done and it's done for good, or you leave it open with so much potential that the reader is left in awe, just saying, wow, what could happen next? And they keep on imagining and dreaming about this story because there's just so much left to tell. And that is the same beautiful and open feeling that I get whenever I watch or read The Lord of the Rings. Now then, I do apologize that I've been rambling quite a bit here in this video, and if you've continued on up to this point, thank you. Thank you for spending this time with me. It really has been an adventure, and it's been an adventure to voice my thoughts and my opinions right here, and it just made me appreciate the series even more. And there's a couple of other things I just want to throw out there just because, yeah, this struck me and I loved it. For one thing, I love, and I know there's a whole lot of other fans out there who agree with me on this, but I love the strong, thick, yoked women within this series. Debonair and Grimm, those are like my ideal women right there. Strong, full of personality, they can bend me over backwards, tall, just, you gotta love them. You gotta love them. But also, when I saw Grimm for the first time and recognized, oh, this is where this story is going, I was like, whoa, that's the manga version of a character I really want to write. And it made me so happy because I was like, I'm not alone in thinking that a tall, white-haired, buff woman would be a complete badass and a fantastic hero to have in a story. Yes! Because I'm like, Grimm is Whitefire. My character Whitefire, that's her. Awesome. I've seen it. I've realized it. Incredible. And Debonair's the buff Mina that we never knew that we needed. And also, as far as the characters go, I love that Velu is just his happy, bright self, his very optimistic self. He's such a shonen protagonist, and yet, at the same time, he's not your typical shonen protagonist because he's in a world where it's not that people are saying, no, you can't be that, or yes, you can be whatever you want to be, but rather, well, that's nice, kid, but wake up to the reality. being a hero won't save everyone. If you want to save people, you gotta be realistic. You gotta be a hunter. And I really like that message right there. And another thing that I really appreciate about the story is how it handled not just its meta storytelling, which it did phenomenally well, but I like how even in just such a really rushed ending, Kawaguchi did not forget the supporting cast and brought them in at least some small, meaningful way to say, hey, look, along the way, all of these characters, they actually mattered. And that's something that's really great to see, that all of these little background characters and side characters actually meant something. It's harder than you think. It honestly is. Especially because, well, once you dive into the story of the main characters, you're in neck deep in the story of the main characters. And it's so easy to either just totally focus on them or just for the story to become so huge that most of the time it's focusing on the side characters than on the main characters that you came here originally for. And instead, Hunter's Guild, with what it had, balanced everything really well. And that was just very enjoyable to see. So on the whole, I'm sad that the series is over. I'm really happy that I got the chance to read it. I'm happy that Kawaguchi had the chance to create it, to write, to put it out there into the world. And it will be out there to inspire and entertain people for a long time to come. He's not yet done. And neither is this story, in one form or another. And that's something that, as a writer, that gives me so much hope and motivation. Because, yeah, I know there's a very good chance that I won't succeed for a long time yet. But if I keep on going, one day I will. And what I do put out right now, it will entertain, it will inspire, it will mean something. And if anything, it means something to me and to my characters, especially as my characters come to life and get to experience the world that I've shaped for them, and that they go on to become who they are meant to be. And that's just something that is extremely fulfilling. So many times we as writers talk about how we are cruel gods who love to torture and hurt our heroes and our cast in order to make them become their best selves. Well, while that is true to a certain extent, let me just also say that it's really, really fulfilling to put my characters not just through the horrible parts of the story, but through all the parts of the story. The good, the awkward, the intense, the romantic, the fighting, the chaos, the depressing. All of it to help them become their best selves. A well-rounded individual who has gone through a complete arc and has helped bring other characters and the story to a good conclusion. And that is just so fulfilling to write and to create. And while Hunter's Guild ended prematurely, you can still feel that at the end. And that's incredible. And that's the way I want all of my stories to feel. Though, hopefully, not as rushed and just way more engaging. And like I said, it is now one of my goals in life to meet Kawaguchi face to face and just have a great conversation with him about his story. I really want to do it for something that has, just for a short amount of time, really inspired me, has meant something, and I don't want something so good to just simply disappear down the memory hole or into the ether. I want it to be something that I keep alive, even if in my own way. And so, yeah, this is unfortunately the end, but it really isn't, because there's still so much more to come, and I'm really excited to see how it continues on for Kawaguchi, for Hunter's Guild, for myself, for all of us who have enjoyed this series. While it is an end, it is not the end, and that's really awesome. So those are my thoughts, as rambling as they were. I thank you for joining me on this review of Hunter's Guild. And if you have made it all the way through to the end and you haven't read this, I encourage you to pick it up. Sure, I spoiled a whole lot, but you know what? It is a fantastic read. Do it. Do yourself the favor. Read it. It is incredible. And in the meantime, until the next video, y'all, Please go check out our podcast for more writing advice. Please also check out our other videos here on YouTube. We also have writing exercises over at our Pinterest page for all of you writers out there. And we would love to also have you join our communities over at our subreddit and at our Discord. And until the next video, y'all, tschüss.